verses 44 to 58 for Matthew 13. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they replied. He said to them, therefore every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old. When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? They asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary, and aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offence at him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honour, except in his own town and in his own home. And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith.
Give me just one moment and then I will be set up and ready to go. Well, that feels a bit better. Good morning. Thank you, Chris, for reading. A few weeks ago, when we started this sermon series, Charlie mentioned that Jesus, as a rabbi, would have sat to teach. So, in an attempt today at full biblical accuracy, I'm going to preach seated, gliding over the lack of beard, sandals, or being male, of course. Never mind. I watched Andy's sermon last week and thought, wow, he got so much from 3 verses. How am I going to fit all of this in? So, today is going to be a high-speed trip through the last few parables and one very awkward visit home. So hang on to your seats and please keep all arms, legs and Bibles inside the chapel at all times. And we're going to begin in the only logical place. Chocolate. It's coming up on Easter. Growing up, my family had a tradition, like I think lots of families do, of having an Easter egg hunt every year. We did it for quite a lot longer than most other families, my brother being 30 the last time we did it, and it only stopped due to the pandemic. But every year, small foil-covered chocolate eggs would be hidden around our house, and in the most competitive game of the year, my brother and I would race each other to see who could find the most. There was always a reckoning at the end in which everyone was divided and given the appropriate portion of chocolate. We weren't allowed to just keep our section. There is a second part to our family tradition, and for anyone here who's ever done an Easter egg hunt, I don't know whether you've had this tradition too, and that is you must never, ever, ever find at least one egg. It must be lost. It doesn't matter how recently they were hidden. It doesn't matter how hard you hunt. You will never find the last egg. So, now with these 2 facts in mind, I'm going to take you back to Easter of 2009. We were living in Dubai, and we had our standard, highly competitive Easter egg hunt, and we lost the obligatory 1 egg. few months later, we moved back to the UK permanently. And as the removal men tipped a sofa to bring it through the front door of our house, what should fall out but one small foil-covered egg? When I read these parables, this is the story that hopped into my head. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and reburied. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. These two parables are so similar, and yet they're so different. I'm not denying that what was found was of far greater value than a chocolate egg, but there's just so many questions. And what does it even mean? Maybe if we compare the two, we can boil down to something useful, the information that we have. So, we start off with two very vague characters. The first, who found the treasure in the field, clearly gains by his find. But his choice to rebury the treasure, maybe he's not the most honest man. Let's name him Mr. Morally Dubious. The wealthy merchant, on the other hand, gives up everything for a single pearl. You can't split a pearl to buy something. It's all or nothing. That sounds like a really bad business idea. Let's call him Mr. Not Logical. They're very different people, and how they found their treasure is very different. Mr. Logical took time and energy to search out for this thing that he hoped existed. He thought he knew there would be a pearl of great value, so he looked for it. A little bit like me on my Easter egg hunt. I knew there was chocolate hidden in our house. Mr. Morally Dubious, on the other hand, simply stumbles across it. Well, he didn't even know it was there. That's a little bit like the removal men. They didn't even know we'd had an Easter egg hunt. So, I can't imagine Mr. Not Logical going into a field and getting his hands dirty, digging for treasure. But neither can I imagine Mr. Morally Dubious spending time, energy, and precious resources travelling to far-off markets in search for pearl. And they probably wouldn't have been caught spending time together either. So we've ditched wealth, social status, moral compass, and even logic. So that's who, where, and how out of the running. Maybe it's the item themselves. But they're just so different. Well, they have to go as well then. So, what are we left with? He goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. He went and sold all that he had and bought it. The result is the same. Everything's changed in an instant. The value of their belongings hasn't changed, but the way they see them has altered. Andy said last week that the gospel will mess you up and change your whole world. Mr. Morally Dubious and Mr. Not Logical are a depiction of this. The emotional value to them of the treasure and the pearl they've just found casts everything else into shade. Even their wealth and possibly their morals. They no longer matter. Despite their differences and their imperfections, they are both offered this opportunity, and they both grab it. God plants the treasure where he knows these people will find it. under the confusion of these two parables, is a story of hope. God meets us where we're at and changes how we see the world in a moment. I'm going to skip over the net for a moment. We'll come back to it later, because Jesus' explanation of the parables continues with both this message of hope and changing how we see the world. And have you understood all this? They answered, yes. And he said to them, therefore, every scribe who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household who brings out his treasure, what is new and what is old. When Jesus had finished these parables, he left that place. Have you understood all this? They answered, yes. In that one singular word, they're no longer just followers. They've become teachers. Jesus describes them as scribes. Scribes are men of high Jewish education, yet Jesus has just used that term to describe his ragtag bunch of disciples. He's removed the elitism and the gatekeeping of knowledge and opened it to all who follow him. As Christians and followers of Jesus, this refers to us. Then Jesus continues, the master of a household who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. This is us. We are the master in this moment. But hang on, didn't we just read that to gain the new treasure, we must get rid of the old? No, says Jesus. We don't discard the old treasure. We simply see it differently now we have the new. Or the treasure of the knowledge we already have is changed by the new knowledge of Jesus. As Christians who have easy access to the Bible, we look back and can see the footsteps of Christ through that whole Old Testament. Everything is building to the coming of Jesus. And Jesus even addresses this in Matthew 5:17. Do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For the people hearing this, who didn't have easy access to the prophets' writings, this is a massive gear change. The power of the Torah has just been capped. By the incarnation of God speaking directly to them. When we read the Old Testament, we look at it knowing what the outcome is. It's like watching a mystery for the second time. You suddenly see all the clues through the story that you missed the first time round. The 2019 movie Knives Out is the epitome of this. The reveal leaves our heads spinning. It was right in front of us all along. If you haven't seen the movie, I won't spoil it, but I highly recommend a watch. This is a sofa that I inherited from my Auntie Jean, my dad's aunt. It's a well-built 1960s sofa and contains memories of a special place, time, and person. It looks awful. It's covered in velour. And it smells of 40 years of cigarette smoke. But it still works as a sofa. It could have been thrown out. It was old, it had served its purpose, and there are any number of companies who would happily sell me a new sofa. Instead, I had it reupholstered. It took time and discussion to work out how it should change. It's the same sofa, same frame, same memories, but it appears brand new. Just like this sofa, Jesus has just upcycled the Old Testament, giving it new life and new worth. It's the foundation of Christianity. It gives us our understanding of the world that Jesus lives in. Yet, the strict rules of kosher have been wiped away by the brand new truth of Jesus. Who wouldn't want that? Yet, there are always some who are so attached to the old exterior that they fight to keep it. They can't see past the well-worn velour to the frame underneath. We're about to see an example of this in Jesus' visit home. He came to his hometown and began to teach the people in their synagogue, so that they were astounded and said, "Where did this man get this wisdom and these deeds of power? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? And are not his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And are not all of his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all this?" And they took offence at him. But Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honour except in their own hometown and in their own household." And he did not do many deeds of power there because of their disbelief. I'm just going to say it. As someone with the whole story laid out in front of me, I look at this passage and I cringe. How could they not see what was right in front of them? When we think about Jesus, we often look at his divinity, the amazing things he's done and his connection with God. We see him first as part of the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We connect with his humanity, but we seek and search for his divinity as having the greater value, because that's what sets him apart from the mundane. The people of Jesus' hometown, Nazareth, knew him primarily as the son of Joseph, a humble carpenter, and his wife Mary. The older brother to people they knew. How could he be different? They see his humanity and struggle to accept his divinity. Now, I'm pretty sure that everyone knows who this logo belongs to. Superman. One day, a small boy walks into his classroom and says to his teacher, Miss, my uncle is Superman." And she says to him, "Superman is a fictional comic book character. He's not real. It's not very nice to make up stories like that, is it?" He says, "But Miss, it's true. He is Superman." The teacher carries on with her day. Throughout the day, she sees him excitedly telling his friends and other peers that his uncle is Superman. And again, she corrects him. In the end, she decides she's going to have to speak to this little boy's mum. It's got to stop. So as all the other children leave at the end of the day, the teacher pulls his mum to one side and explains what's been happening. The little boy's mum looks the teacher in the eye and says, "I'm really sorry. It's you that's wrong. It's not him. My son's uncle is Superman." That little boy's uncle is an actor called Henry Cavill, who, at the time of this classroom incident, was actively playing Superman. The teacher couldn't rationalise her truth with the truth of the child, so she assumes that the child is just seeking attention. After all, how could it possibly be true? Superman, to the minds of most of us, is like the ideal image of a superhero. He's strong, he's soldierly. He's the person who comes in to help those in need, fight for justice and seek vengeance. For the Jewish people, this is how they expect the Messiah to come, flying in with a sword of fire to destroy the people who oppress them and reclaim their homeland. To suddenly be confronted with the idea that the Messiah hasn't just failed to turn up in a blaze of glory, he's also turned up as an average-looking bloke, someone you know and watched grow up. The disappointment must have just been so severe. It just can't be right. Or can it? So, yes, they were unbelieving and they lacked in faith. Jesus doesn't return home again. And we never see the long-term impact this face-to-face encounter with God had on this community. For some, this was the planting of a seed. Maybe it's sometimes easier to judge people's reaction to Jesus from the distance of reading it as a story, having to dig down inside ourselves and ask, how would I respond? Would I believe is just too uncomfortable? Now we're in this place of discomfort, we're going to circle back round to the story of the net. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, and put the good into baskets and threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The Christian motivational speaker, Michael Hyatt, says, discomfort is a catalyst for growth. It makes us yearn for something more and forces us to change, stretch, and adapt. What if we take the discomfort from the end of this passage and use it to focus on what this parable depicts? Let's break this down into two parts, the fish bit and the not fish bit. Makes sense. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and captured fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, and put the good into baskets and threw out the bad. When we read this, it reads as a second calling to be fishers of men. It gives us the power, not only to spread the word of God, but also to choose who gets into the club of Christianity. That's nice. That's comforting. I'm in control of my own destiny and who I want to share my faith with. Let's stop there. However, we read on in the next verse. So it will be at the end of the age, the angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous. The new information has changed how we see this passage. We've gone from being the powerful fisherman with the net of truth to being a humble fish just along for the ride. If all people are fish, then apart from stumbling across the net like the man stumbles across the treasure in the field, all we're doing is journeying alongside each other. The power of judgment has been removed and placed back into the hands of the divine. The American evangelist Billy Graham says, "It's the Holy Spirit's job to convict. God's job to judge and my job to love. We only have control over our own response to both God and others. God holds everything else. So, as we draw to the end of our high-speed journey through these seemingly disjointed stories which started with chocolate and ended with the power of God, we've seen repeatedly that the truth of Jesus can change our views, understanding, and opinion in a moment. It comes in many forms and from many places, and sometimes from where we least expect it. But if we're open to this truth, it might just revolutionize our world. In the words of the American President Theodore Roosevelt, keep your eyes on the stars and your feet on the ground. But if you take just one thing away from today, let it be the humble fish, travelling in love and grace with those who are around you.